Jon Gehrs, had co-founded Pacific Foods in Oregon in 1987, a leading natural and organic foods company that lived its mission every day. Formerly, he served as the company's president of packaged products and led an executive team that grew the company's sales to $250 million in 2017. That year, the company sold to Campbell Soup Company for $700 million, with $130 million of the net proceeds shared with 600 employees. Yeah. That's a lot of van build-outs. Gehrs endeavors to be a catalyst for positive change in the lives of the people he touches through work or personally, and always saw the company's people as its greatest asset. Jon, I can't wait to hear more about people being the company's greatest asset. It gives me chills. You know where I stand. Come on up here and take it away.
Okay, so I'll start. I'll tell the Pacific Foods story. It's a little dated now because we had a liquidity event about a little over 4 years ago. But I think, and I'll talk about that toward the end. But I think the steps we took along the way are relevant at any time for anybody in any company. And so, being able to get up here and share that with all of you, I think, is the kind of the most important thing. I had initially told Aaron I wasn't really thinking I wanted to do this because it's kind of a narrow spot up here, and I'm a walking, talking, thinking, rambling guy. So when I do meetings like with the employees and other places, I like to walk the aisles and talk to people and look at them. So it's really hard for me right now to be able to look in this blinding light, not see anybody, and hope that I'm getting across to everybody. Usually I can see people's faces and know that they're getting the message or not. So I'll do my best, and we'll see where we go. So we started Pacific Foods in 1987, but prior to that, I'll give you just a little bit of my personal story. I was a public accountant, large Big 8 firm. Did a lot of work with retail companies, heavy, and like Fred Meyer, for instance, was one of my clients, and manufacturing as well. One of my manufacturing clients was Lamb Weston, frozen French fry producer. Now it's ginormous, but at the time it was headquartered in Portland and was probably $300 or $400 million, something like that. One of the people that worked there, VP of Finance, was a gentleman called Chuck Eggert. If any of you know Chuck, he was the majority founder of Pacific Foods, one of the co-founders. And he had worked there at Lamb Weston. That's how we met initially. We lost track of each other for a couple years, came back together, bumped into each other just by happenstance. And he was out investing in small companies with his father-in-law. Called me up a couple weeks later and said, Jon, would you come over and work with us? We need some help. And that kind of started the relationship with Chuck primarily for about, now it's going on 40 years. He's an innovation kind of juggernaut person. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he's still working away 24 hours a day on different things. So he's a great guy. But we started out investing in small companies, spice company, peanut butter company up in Seattle, a few other things. Didn't start Pacific Foods till 1987. And the way we started it was we had a joint venture with a soy milk and tofu company that failed. And as part of splitting the sheets, we got this state-of-the-art soy milk making equipment from Denmark. Had no idea what we were going to do with it because we were investing in small companies. We were expecting them to kind of do stuff, and we would just oversight them. So we had a couple buildings that we had from a real estate venture we were starting in Tualatin. And we said, what the heck, let's just put the equipment in there and play around with it. So I'd like to be up here and tell you that we had a master plan and a strategy. We didn't. We just started playing with soy milk equipment and making really interesting automated tofu, which probably could have covered the planet. But it wasn't going to be a real good business strategy just by itself. So we looked around and said, what is the market doing? How is it taking soy milk? And it was in these funny boxes that were shelf-stable that were made by Tetra Pak. So we said, well, we can have that co-pack, so we sent it to California. So it sent the soy milk to California to where there was a co-packer, packed it up, sent it back to us, and then we sent it out from there and tried to sell it. We figured out pretty quickly, because most of us had accounting backgrounds, that the people that were making the money were the shipping companies down and shipping companies back and shipping companies out. And we were just having a little bit of fun and making a lot of mistakes. So, but when we realized that, we decided we needed to put in our own aseptic packaging equipment. And so the vendor, Tetra Pak, came out, sold us a couple of broken down fillers, and that's how we started into making soy milk products in Tetra Pak packages, aseptic packaging. Good thing and a bad thing. We were one of the only ones in the country that had those packaging machines. So basically everybody in natural foods that did non-dairy beverages came through our facility packing product in a contract packing mode. Good for our cash flow, good for all that. They didn't have the ability, capital-wise or equipment-wise, to do it themselves. Usually back then in natural foods, maybe it's a little bit that way now, people have a great idea in their garage, but they don't have any money to be able to get it to market or to buy the equipment. We had the equipment. As you'll find out in a couple minutes, that could be a curse as well. So we did that for about 7 years, just kind of starting up and kind of doing that contract packing. Our branded product was only about 10% of what we did. The rest of it was just contract packing. So in 1994, and I can tell you the exact date and time, it was July 31st at 7:30 in the evening, and I can still remember that time, even now. I got a call at home. Chuck had been meeting with one of our customers at a food show who was telling them that they're going to leave us from their contract packing arrangement with us in 6 months. Now, this was a customer who was 60 to 70% of my line time and 60 to 70% of my revenues. And I was going to lose them in 6 months. And we were right in the middle of putting in $5 million of capital expenditure, new equipment, which they knew. They were kind of planning it for when they would tell us that, because what they wanted us to also do was contract pack for them for the next 6 months and not shut them down so that they could get to their new machine. Clever of them. And what they were putting in, what we were putting in, if you remember back, those of you who are old enough will remember the aseptic packages back in the day were the ones you had to open up the ears and cut open. They didn't have caps on the top. We were getting the first capped machine in the United States. They were getting number 2 now, but just as fast as we were. So what that did, we had no choice but to pack for them and lose their volume. So somewhat difficult to take, obviously. This was a situation in natural foods where everybody believed and trusted everybody else. You were out to save the planet together. Your word is your bond. Trust goes a long ways, all yada, yada, yada. And so we learned pretty quickly that that's not the case. And we went through about 2 years of Death Valley, what I call Death Valley, where we struggled. I worried every 2 weeks about whether we could cover that payroll that we had coming up. And we were pretty small at the time, like really small. Still, it hurt to lose them. But what it allowed us to do, there's a silver lining to that, and there's actually several. First thing we did was we spent time thinking about what we really wanted to be when we grew up. What's our mission going to be? What's our core values? What's important to us? One of the things that influenced us was a book by a guy named Charles Handy, and it's The Hungry Spirit. If you guys ever get the chance to read that, you'll find that, and hopefully you'll kind of compare it to my talk, and you'll understand how Pacific Foods used that as one of the foundational pieces for them building our core values and our beliefs. I'm going to just read a little excerpt. This is somebody who's like reviewed the book and just wrote it down because it kind of speaks to what I'm talking about. The Hungry Spirit by Charles Handy, calling on individuals and organizations to find purpose to the journey we take rather than focusing on money and profits, which are simply the means to keep us going. He shows how we can all better ourselves and our companies while also contributing to a decent society. So we kind of wanted to do that. We didn't think at the time capitalism was a bad thing, but we were struggling with how do we bring money into how we run the company, because it's hugely important, but it's just a tool. And we know we wanted to be known for something else. So it helped us to build our core values and beliefs, our mission statement, how we wanted to be looked at out in the marketplace. It also helped us identify our core competencies. We realized that we were actually pretty good at aseptic processing, which is a very exacting process. You can do products that make people very, very, very sick or worse if you don't do it right. And we could do it pretty well. We also knew that we were in a marketplace that allowed a lot of forgiveness. Natural foods was still developing, and you still could do things based upon relationships. So you could actually, create products and try them. And if they didn't work, you could try other ones. It's not so much that way anymore, obviously, for those of you who sell products out into that marketplace, but back then it was. We embraced risk. We could not embrace risk because of what we had gone through. We had to try everything. We were highly innovative. We had a really good R&D staff. We could develop products that were really, really good. So with all that, we started just doing what we could to keep the lights on. We took in limited contract packing, but we knew that that wasn't what we needed to be. We needed to be a brand. And we needed to transition to that. So we developed products. The first one was the chicken broth, which hopefully all of you are familiar with their product line. And if you aren't, you need to look in your pantry because you probably have a box of Pacific Foods chicken broth in there. You just don't know it. Might be a few years old, I don't know, but it's probably in there. But we started with that. It was a category killer. It killed the can. And Campbell's came out with a Swanson's a box about the same time. But that transitioned that marketplace to the box and made it very acceptable in the United States and made it not just happening like in non-dairy beverages, which at the time were kind of actually migrating into the refrigerated format anyway. So and we weren't refrigerated basic. We didn't ship that way. We didn't produce that way. So we knew that we had to do something else with the shelf-stable box, and we went into broth. And then right after that, we went into creamy soups. So and I'll get to this toward the end too, we also experimented a little bit with other people, what I call other people's money or other people's relationships. We had a relationship with Novartis for a while, also with GNC, to try and figure out how do we work together to do products that would help both of us. But at the end of the day, neither one of those worked out because we just had different goals, different interests on how we wanted to go about the things and how we wanted to put products in the marketplace. In 2001, I was given the responsibility to kind of take over the operating company as that lofty title that you gave me, president of the packaged products division, which basically means I just had the operating company underneath me and I got to handle all the problems and issues and employee things and all that kind of stuff. Chuck kind of booted himself upstairs into blue ocean thinking on new product things and stuff like that, and I got to handle the rest of the stuff. In 2001, we switched out our sales function into a classic consumer product goods VP. That helped immensely as we started heading down the branded product kind of pathway. In 2004, added a director of marketing. Prior to that, we just had somebody who was doing package development, package format development. We're not real marketing experts at all. So along the way, we started adding other people, more equipment. We kept adding just a lot of product development. I was trying to remember all the products that we actually produced. And some of those probably you guys have never heard of or seen, but that's okay because there was a purpose and a reason for why we did that. We were doing things like dog gravy, protein drinks, polenta in a box, oatmeal in a box, black beans in a box. I'm sure you probably have seen the bone broth that's out there. That was something that were just experimentally trying, and it actually worked as a major product group for us. So all that was to show customers what we could do. And some of those work, and they stick against the wall, and some of them don't. But it's the whole thing about trying to be innovative and trying to show your end customer what you're capable of doing. So as we grew, we probably grew 10 to 15% a year for about 20 years from 2001 on. And those steps get to be kind of a little bit big when you're trying to fund yourself internally and with bank debt and not with other people's money. We had obviously the opportunity to do that along the way numerous times. And most of our brethren in the natural foods industry got picked off along the way over those 10 or 15 years. We just didn't want to do that. And the reason I say that is just because we weren't about the money thing. When you remember back to the core values development and everything else, it was really we're trying to figure out how to provide products to people that resonate with them, and make them think about what they're eating and where it's coming from. If you, sidebar to that would be if any of you are Portlandia fans, and you remember the very first, I think it was the very first episode where they were sitting in the restaurant talking about the chicken and naming the chicken, and can we go out and visit him and his friends and see where he lives? We live that. We live that. I would show that at employee meetings and say, our customers are heading here, right? Because it's important for us to be ahead of them and tell them where the stuff's coming from, how we're growing it, what we're feeding the animals. The other example would be that we would do customer surveys about what the attributes are that they're buying against. And animal welfare, probably 15 years before that, was, you know, in the top 25, maybe 20. In the last 3 or 4 years, we pulled it top 3 consistently. And so we needed to know that. We needed to know how, because we eventually started getting into organic dairy farms and raising chickens and humane slaughterhouse and a bunch of other stuff. And we needed to make sure that that whole story was right and was transparent and that the customers knew it that way and that we were open to them about that. So as we grew and we started making those steps and not wanting other people's money involved, you run out of how many rabbits you can pull out of that hat every year. And the brand, which was a great thing for us, this isn't an egotistical thing to say this, but the great thing, the last 3 or 4 years we were there, the brand sold itself. And if your marketing guys are here, don't throw things at me from the back of the room, but marketing was always one of the expenses we cut toward the end of the year because it was a variable expense. And if I wasn't hitting the numbers to make the bank happy, I would go in and I'd say, look, this quarter we're not going to spend as much money. That's just the way it is. And the guys, they still hung with us, which was awesome, but the brand would still sell because it was selling itself. It was so well known and the products were so good. So that was a great position to be in, but it put more pressure on your cash flow and on everything else that you needed to do to kind of support that. And we were wearing our people out. Our people stayed with us, but we were wearing them out. So we talked about that a lot because we never gotten into the company to try and create a big payday. It really wasn't about that at all. And we said we probably need to sell to somebody, but we can't just do a partial sale and stay involved because of all the things we talked about, other people's money. Used to joke with Chuck. I'd meet with him once a week in his office, and I'd say, that's our board meeting. 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning, we'd have a board meeting, just he and I sit there talking about things. But the things we talked about were things like, what kind of products are we going to try this week? Anything interesting? You know, what are we going to develop? What are we going to do with employees? You know, what are we going to do with our culture? All those kind of conversations. And we decided that if we had other people's money in the company, they'd want to be at that meeting. But they'd want to talk about their money. They wouldn't want to talk about those things. Because we weren't trying to make a bottom line. Most of the time, we were trying to spend all of our money down to the point where the bank was happy, and we paid as little taxes as possible. So I wasn't trying to build it up to sale or do any of that kind of stuff, which, you know, you could say it should have done it differently. If we had spent more money on marketing, if we had taken in other people's money, we could have grown a lot faster than we did. But at the end of the day, when we got to 2017, we decided we needed to go out to sell. We did an organized process. We selected the ones we wanted our investment banker to talk to, 12 different companies, all strategic fits, not any private equity or venture capital companies, because we wanted to have it be somebody who could take the brand and nurture it and grow it the way it was, as we hoped they would do. So we did that process. Campbell's was the winner. They paid $700 million for, at the time, $250 or $260 million of gross sales, so about probably a 3x on net sales or so. It was an awesome result for as large as we were and for the market we were in. You could argue how much they paid for us and whether that was the right number or not. I think they did it from the standpoint is they didn't want us on the shelf with a competitor that could actually spend money on the brand and really hurt them. So they wanted to use it as a flanking strategy against other people, which is, you know, then they'd spend the money. So out of that money, we paid off quite a lot of traditional bank debt and leases and just a ton of other stuff. But what's left is, as you shared, was we had about $130 million that we shared with 600 employees and their families. And that, thanks. And people, thanks, but it's like some people like appreciate that, but I'm saying I'm wired to say I don't know why we wouldn't have done that, right? Because it's like they create the value with you. Why wouldn't you share the value with them? And we were able to do that and share that money and change lives. I mean, people were coming to my office crying about they've just paid off their house or they're putting their first kid into college and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, this is what my life was all about. And I'm still kind of young. I hope that there's still more. But that's like one of the things I can check on my bucket list of something I've done that I think was right for society and good for the planet and all that kind of stuff. So now whether we can argue over a beer later or some other day about whether we think Campbell's is running the company correctly and according to our values, who knows, right? You have seller's remorse at times. But what I know is that we left the employees there a lot better off than when they had walked in the door there, and that was a primary motivation for us. So lessons learned, because I was told I needed to give lessons learned. First and foremost, you might want to think long and hard about contract packing. And if you want to do contract packing for people, have some agreements, right? And that are pretty ironclad. The other reason you want to think about that too is just that it doesn't create value. When you have a brand and you can support brand, you can create value. And the value is like what you saw at the end when we sold the company for 3x revenues. You don't get 3x revenues when you're a contract packer. Plus you always have the risk of customers leaving you. At least I know when I'm selling chicken broth, I'm selling to 10 million people out there. I'm not selling to one person who's making the decision whether they want to contract pack with me or not. So that would be one lesson. The other one, which I just kind of talked about, is to be brand focused. We had brand attributes like innovation, authenticity, transparency, quality, really good products. Being able to go out and name, you want to go out and pet the cow at our farm, you come out and pet the cows at the farm and see them. I mean, that's how we wanted to be with our customers. So always be brand focused and invest in the brand. The other thing I think I would say is, and this is from a guy you can see his TED Talks, Simon Sinek, if you're familiar with him, and how he talks about developing a why for your company. Everybody knows kind of how you do stuff, everybody knows what you do, but people buy on why you do it. It's a very powerful message. It might be a really good TED Talk if you're not familiar with that. But it helped shape us over the last probably 3 or 4 years before we sold, how we developed a corporate why and how we integrated it into our marketing strategies and stuff like that. But really understanding why you exist as a company. Added benefit, if you really want to take it further than that, is to develop your own personal why and why you exist. And why are you around? Are you just taking up space on the planet, or is there a purpose and a meaning for your life, and what are you doing with it? And why? And we spent time on that. It was pretty gratifying. I did my own why. She kind of told you what it was already. But I also asked most of our direct leaders and managers at the time, out of the 600 people, we had probably 35 or 40 of them, and I asked them to do their why if they were willing. Super cool thing was 4 or 5 of them actually did that, and they sent it to me very thoughtfully in emails about who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. So it's just super cool. You change the world one person at a time, right? And I got 5, so I was pretty pumped. The other thing is to take care of and reward your people. I think that's pretty evident in what we did. And last but not least, I'd probably say to everybody here, when you decide to work somewhere or do something, do it because you want to do it, not because you have to do it. 90% of the world probably works somewhere because they have to get that paycheck every 2 weeks, and they don't foster a why. They don't follow their passion or anything like that. So when I'm mentoring young people and just fledgling CEOs and stuff like that, they're starting their companies, that's what I tell them. Make sure that you're doing it because you want to do it, and it creates that passion for you. Don't do it because you have to do it. Don't do it because you have to. So with that, I'll kind of turn it back over to you. You're going to give me questions, aren't you?
Thanks, Jon. That was really nice. I felt like I was at church if I liked church. Do you know what I mean by that? That was like really meaningful, like really special. You offered a lot of deep wisdom.
Wait, well, hold on. I'm going to pass the plate then, right? That's part of the service? No.
Absolutely,
Okay.
and I'll take 10%. Okay, so what are you doing now?
So I get the opportunity of being able to mentor, like I said, young and fledgling CEOs and other leaders. I get to work with really super smart CEOs in small companies like Paul Evers with Rift Beverages, and several others of those. But I try, my spouse is here, Kelly. She'll tell you if you talk to her that she's trying to limit my time in doing those things to 50% or less, because otherwise I'll just get too busy.
Yeah,
So-
good. That's really good. Paul's like, I got in, so all the rest of you, good luck. Get on the wait list. Okay, so I don't know if this is a bad question or a good one, but I am genuinely curious. Can you identify things that have changed after you sold Pacific Foods to Campbell's? Like, obviously there were some things that were so important to you. Can you identify if some of those things are still happening?
Yeah, I'll try a few. I'll be nice about it. So we noticed the same thing with, I'll go back a little bit. When we dealt with Novartis, which is a huge multinational conglomerate you guys know, we had signed up with them with people from Switzerland. Well, then they downloaded the project. By the time we started to execute the project, there was the distribution people were in San Diego, and the sales people were in Michigan, and product development was in New Jersey. And by the way, the people in Switzerland were gone by the time we started the project, so nobody owned it. And it was just a classic big company thing. It was not mine. They were doing the whole crocodile arms. Pacific Foods? Who did that again? And that's why we got back out of that, right? So what happened, at least at Campbell's, is the people that did the deal, and if you go back into the history of Campbell's, you look at what was going on with them in the year 2018, pretty representative as the CEO left for personal reasons or whatever, however they determined that, right, in April, and this was after they bought us in December. And then right before that, her right-hand person had left. So the people that had done the deal started leaving. And so they obviously had the company. So they brought people in on the type of thing. And so they've done what I affectionately call Campbellize the Company. So they'll bring people in from outside to fill key roles. A lot of times not promoting from within, and that's what a big company does. It gets people experience across units so that they can move farther up into the corporate chain and all that. But what it can tend to do, unless you spend a lot of time on it, is dilute the culture and the reason why the company existed and why it was so successful. What I wanted them to do, if they had asked me, by the way, is leave us alone. You've bought it, just let them keep doing what they're doing, but give them money. Yeah. Give them some marketing money, and they'll grow more than 10 to 15% for you, and leave them alone. But big companies don't do that. So that's just an FYI. It's not just them, by the way. It's every big company I've seen. It's Murphy's Law. Yeah. They can't not do that. They can't not say, oh, well, we'll make it more efficient in our supply chain. We'll make it more efficient in sales, et cetera, without looking at, well, why were they successful in the first place, and can we not nurture and grow that and leave them alone?
No, they always ruin it. They always ruin the fun.
Yeah.
Bummer. Well, I do have some of this stuff in my pantry, so I'm going to go take a closer look. Any questions for Jon from the audience? I feel like there's probably going to be quite a few. Oh, yes, over here. How do you own the means of production if you're a startup? If you don't right now, when do you make that decision?
So it's difficult, right? And I think one of the reasons, or one of the key things is, do you have the money to be able to do that? Number one, do you have the facilities? Do you have the equipment, technology, expertise, and ability to do that? Do you have the people that can do that? There's a lot of reasons to contract pack. A lot of people start out that way, right? It doesn't take people. It doesn't take a building. It doesn't take. I mean, I get it. A lot of companies start out that way, but it means that you're not in control of your own destiny as much, right? So how do you make that decision? You got to look at all those factors, right? Do you have the money to do that? Do you have the technology? Are you going to be able to protect yourself if you are contract packing somewhere else? Because you can do that. I mean, we just didn't do that well. But the silver lining is I'm glad we didn't, because then we really had to force change, and it was a monumental change. There's nothing like going through 2 years of looking into the valley of death every day to really hone your view of what you don't want to be going forward, right? So, yeah, I just don't know if that helped or not, but yeah. It's kind of case by case, too.
That's a good question. Any other questions for Jon at the moment? Yes, Paul.
Jon, you're deeply motivated for values, which is really extraordinary.
So, so you're deeply motivated by values. You care about humanity. What are some of those values that are motivating you? Did I do that okay?
That's good. And where did those come from?
And where did those come from? I added the hands. Did that help? Where did those come from? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I'm motivated to see. I want, and it's my why, right? I want to motivate and inspire people every day to be the best they can be because they can make positive change in this world. And you can do that one person at a time. Where did it come from, Paul? I have no idea, but I know that when you're at a company that values things like environment and people and community, you tend to by osmosis get some of that into your blood, right? I mean, one of our beliefs was nobody should ever be hungry, and if that sounds familiar, that's because that's an Oregon Food Bank thing. Nobody should ever be hungry. And we were a food company that was producing, basically hundreds of millions of pounds of food a year. We probably shipped, 1.5 million pounds of food a year to the Oregon Food Bank, and we should do more. We could have done more. We should have done more because they need it, and we're a food company, and we could do that, right? There's easy things you can do to really become engaged with your passion or with who you are internally, right? So, yeah.
I thought you were going to say it was because of your wife. And she inspired you.
Well, she's the primary
to be a better
motivator
person.
behind me. Yeah.
I thought that's where we were going.
Yeah.
Maybe next question. Yes.
On the current Pacific Foods website, the food donation part of your community page ends in 2017. It's probably been around since that full-time the acquisition. Is there advice you give for rapidly growing founders moving towards a major acquisition that they can bake in some of those core values of purpose into
Yeah, this is a good question.
an actual acquisition to say, hey, we need this much money in order for the acquisition to happen?
I like this question. So he said he went and he checked out the website, and the charitable giving, the food bank giving program ended in 2017, which he found very curious. And he's just wondering if maybe you have any advice for rapidly growing founders, so how they can bake in some of those really important programs to make sure that it survives the acquisition. Is that? Yeah.
So it survives that? Yeah. Boy, that's a dang good question. Like in our situation, I would have thought that would have carried through because it was in the DNA there.
Yeah.
And they're doing their corporate giving, but it originates out of somewhere in Camden, right? It's not local, it's not on the ground, right? So, the best. I don't know how you bake that in because honestly, it was in our DNA of all of our employees. We actually gave people time. You could take your department over and pack food boxes today for 2 hours. Go. That kind of thing. And then the food boxes would go to the schools and wherever else we were trying to give this stuff. So the best you could do is, I think, try and bake it into the DNA of the employees, whatever it is, right, as soon or as quick as you can, and make sure it's not shallow, and then hope for the best. And then you got to qualify the acquirer, but you can't. I hate to say you can't trust them, but you can't trust them. Just
Yeah.
and it's not a negative against Campbell's. It just basically
It's just how it is.
happens, right? It's the people that we dealt with changed over. They got to defocus. They lost us. They went into a thing where it's way overspent on acquisitions, and they had to retrench, and all these things go to the wayside. The best intentions kind of thing. So, and with the bigger they are, the more that will most likely happen. So you need to spend a lot of time with the right acquirer, and they were the highest offer, but they did it for a lot of reasons that weren't just for the value of us. I mean, if they were buying us on our, you guys could have probably guessed that. If they were trying to buy us on our EBITDA, I don't even know how they did that calculation, because we spent all of our money on everything and tried to get it as low as possible. So at the end, this is now a financial spin up. At the end, trying to build your financials so they actually look pretty for people. You had to add stuff back in and do the hooey on it. But at the end of the day, what they bought was the brand, right? But the brand, and what I don't think sometimes the companies that buy you understand that. What are they buying? What is the brand? The brand starts with the people and the culture and the products and all of that together, kind of glued together. And they just don't get that. So then they start parting it apart, and it starts drifting. Like, integral part of us was charitable giving, huge. And now they decouple that. It's like, So the message it sends to the 600 employees that were left, big message, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so vague threats.
Yeah.
Vague threats. I always say, when in doubt, vague threats. Any other questions for Jon tonight? I want to make sure. Okay, but you've had an extraordinary career. What's been your favorite part, your highlight?
I'm really jazzed up when I see people kind of get it, right? Like employees.
Yeah.
And see their development. It's just,
Yeah.
And that they can do more. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I want to make sure. Any other questions before okay. This has been truly a gift. Thank you for sharing yourself with us. And 50% or less, 50% or less, I would say. And we do have a gift for you. I'm told you can use it as, how about a round of applause? You can use it to vaguely threaten somebody, or you can just bring it back to the next pub talk and we'll fill it up with bone broth or whatever, veggie stock. Thanks, Jon. Thanks so much.